For the latest information regarding the COVID-19 pandemic in Cupertino, please visit cupertino.org/coronavirus.
And welcome to Monterey County. We are so thrilled to be here today at Elkhorn Elementary School in the North Monterey County School District. We are here today to hear some historic news about a proposal that the governor will be sharing with us very, very soon. And I just have to say, it is my great pleasure to welcome everyone here today, because we know that Monterey County is a county that is very, very diverse. We have tremendous needs in this county, and so we are so excited today to hear the governor's proposal, and we're looking forward to the great news that he's going to share with us very, very shortly. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the president of the State Board of Education, Dr. Linda Darling Hammond. Dr. Hammond?
Thank you very much. When the governor asked me to join his administration when he first entered, I was thrilled to do so because of his vision for California for All, his vision for public education in this state, and his vision for a whole child framework within which we raise our children here. And we've made progress on that vision during the pandemic. But this set of investments and reforms will catapult California forward and really allow us to reinvent the public education system in this state. If you think about what children need to progress in their learning and in their achievement, there are three major things. One is that, of course, we all want children to have caring, competent, and qualified and committed teachers and educators. And this package will put forward a strategy to ensure that we not only solve our teacher shortages, but that we bring teachers through the pipeline into pathways and into the schools that need them most, including accomplished teachers who will be incentivized to go even further in their development and training. The second thing, of course, that children need are programs that give them the learning opportunities that are so essential. And we'll be hearing about the pathway into school through universal TK, the digital divide closing that is going to be accomplished through the investments here, and the curriculum that is really geared at a 21st century approach to learning and to thriving. And then the last thing that kids need is that wraparound services that allow them to be fed, to be healthy, to be supported. And we will see here as you visit Elkhorn Elementary the way in which services from 6 in the morning till 6 in the evening, preschool for infants and toddlers and young children, before and after school care, health and mental health care, come together to create not only a path to survival, but a path to thriving. So important on the heels of the pandemic that has really brought so much challenge to so many families in the state. So this moment is a historic one. California was the undisputed leader in education in the 1970s, 50 years ago, and we had a period of disinvestment in our public schools over a number of years that has been turned around in recent years with some recent recalibration and a new funding formula. But this set of interlocking interventions and investments are going to catapult California back to that leadership position. And more important, it will enable all of our children to be on a path to genuine thriving. Part of that work is the integration of education and health services, and I'm going to introduce our Secretary for HHS, Health and Human Services, Mark Galley, who will explain more about how that integration will occur.
Thank you, Linda, and thanks for having us here at Elkhorn and to Monterey County and all the incredible staff here. It's been great to spend a few minutes on a school campus as a pediatrician and somebody who is raising young kids during this pandemic. It is certainly quite a moment to be able to visit a school that's been operating, doing the best they can during the pandemic, really providing not just the educational services to young people, but the supports to families. And it just really demonstrates the importance of schools and our education system beyond its impact on young people, and really that whole family, whole child approach. And as Linda mentioned, this integration, this link between education service, community services, and health services, we have for decades lamented on an inadequate, underfunded, underscaled behavioral health system that often waits too long to address issues for young people and adults the same. And today's announcement not just is about what we can do here on school campuses to support education, but really to bolster, and we've been saying it a lot, once in a generation, once in a lifetime opportunity to change the course and change the arc of young people's lives. That begins today with some of these budget proposals focused specifically on children's and young people's behavioral health. Historic recommendations for investments in virtual care. We talked, as Linda mentioned, this opportunity. What we've learned in the pandemic is that some of the things that we've had to do, we actually want to continue doing some of those. So the opportunity to build on virtual health, virtual care, bringing an expectation that all Californians 0 to 25 have access to behavioral health services, those assessments, those tools that might help us get through the little bumps in the road, normalizing the ask for help, the reach out in those services, but not forgetting that some young people don't get the help they need in time, or they have significant enough challenges that they need more services in brick and mortar traditional clinical settings, where we need to build up those resources. So investments in those clinics, those urgent care centers, even some of the acute inpatient beds that are often lacking across the state for young people who are in crisis, who are experiencing that first episode of psychosis. And then building up our workforce. We have all too long been able to make a referral just to find out somebody has a many-month-long wait list to get services to young people. That needs to end now. We need to make these investments in building up that workforce. So together, starting with a virtual platform that allows us to link all young people to assessments and care that they might need, linked to the schools, integrated with our partners here in education, but beyond, working with our primary care, our family practice practitioners, our internal medicine docs who take care and provide care to older young people, those in institutes of higher education, our colleges, our universities, our community colleges, whose students and staff have suffered throughout the pandemic. Today's that opportunity to double down on this investment, not just in a small way, not just with a few $1 million or even hundreds of millions of dollars, but billions of dollars of recommended investments in that system. So we go from a system that is reactionary to one that is proactive, looking out for our well-being, investing in today's young people so that tomorrow's leaders are well equipped to lead California into the future. So with that, I will introduce a partner and friend, our Superintendent for Public Education, Mr. Tony Thurman. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Galley. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Go Ocelots. Any Ocelots here today? Go Ocelots. It is so great to be here, as you heard, to be in a school community that has put full supports and wraparounds for our students as we continue to make our way through what has been, I believe, the toughest experience of our lifetime. As Dr. Darling Hammond referenced, to be at a school community where there is support for students and their families from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. That means great learning, in-person instruction. That means meals. That means family engagement to help families. That's exactly what you're going to hear today as you hear our governor talk about California roaring back for our schools. It is exactly the model, and it is why we are here today, and it is an honor to be here. I'd be remiss if I did not say that this is a homecoming for me of sorts. I was born at the old Fort Ord, which is now CSU Monterey. While I was not an Ocelot ever in life, I'm glad to be here with the Ocelot community. To put it in context, so much has been said about what students will need as students return in terms of social, emotional supports. To put it in context, I'd also be remiss if I didn't say that as a son born in this valley, I left this valley immediately. My mother, who was my only parent, was very sick. And when I was 6 years old, she lost her battle to cancer. I ended up living 3,000 miles away from here, being raised by a cousin who I never met before. Now, I am a child who was reared in the 70s. There wasn't a lot of discussion about how do we address trauma for our students. And so all that to say, it's not lost on me how important when our students in this state have fully returned, and most of our schools have reopened for in-person instruction, and everyone understands that as we head to the fall, in-person instruction is what our students need for social connection, for connection with their educators. It's not lost on me that as much as it's important for us to focus on how we accelerate learning and how we provide tutoring and professional development for educators to offset learning gaps that our students have experienced, I can't think of anything more important in how we address the social, emotional learning needs of our students, their mental health and their well-being. We know it. We know the stories. In spite of the great efforts of so many educators and others who've tried to go into distance learning overnight, there have just been impacts. There have been impacts on our students, and those impacts have been felt in terms of depression for our students and setbacks in their learning opportunities, and this is their opportunity to come back from that. And so I'm grateful to our governor who's had the vision. This is not a new area for Governor Newsom. If you look at what the governor has done in these 2+ years in his service, he has prioritized programs like community schools, which means that the school is the community center and provides the wraparound supports that our families need. And we're seeing that example right here where we stand today. And so I'm grateful to this governor for that commitment. I'm grateful to hear the governor and the Secretary of Health and Human Services talk about billions for helping, right? Billions to help our behavioral health systems do what they can to support our students. All of our systems have been stretched, and the pandemic has certainly stretched us even more. And to hear the governor and his team say that we're making billions in terms of investments means that as we come out of this difficult circumstance, that we capture the moment to make the investments that propel us forward, to support the needs of our students right here and right now. And at the same time, to say, as Dr. Darling Hammond has said, we must reimagine how we approach education. We must look at those things that did not work for all of our students and families before and take that knowledge to help us propel forward in a way that supports them going forward. And so everything that you'll hear about more dollars for summer programs, for tutoring, for professional development for educators, for us to think differently about the way students learn and to respond and how we support them, and to make sure that they have access to the types of mental health and behavioral health that you heard Secretary Galley talk about. I believe that we have a fractured system that's trying to support students in their mental health. Schools are doing all they can. County mental health systems are doing all they can. But we need the ability to fill gaps. And what you're hearing here today, again in the billions, is a program that helps to fill those gaps, that layers together resources to address trauma and to support well-being for our students. We'll do our part at the California Department of Education. We've been busy doing webinars on social emotional learning to make sure our educators get the training and the support that they need. We've been talking about the pandemic, and we've been talking about the pandemic of racism. This has been an incredibly difficult year. Our students have watched the murder of George Floyd on television. Our students have watched the surge and spike in hate crimes against the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. Our students have watched a negative counterculture against immigrant families and Latinx families, and we have to address the trauma that they have experienced. We support their learning needs, and we support their developmental needs. And so I'm proud of our governor. I'm proud of our state. Our governor needs no introduction. He has been at the forefront of everything that this state needs during this pandemic, to get our schools open, to get our business communities open, to follow the science and to keep us safe. I wouldn't want to be in any other state And I'm grateful that our state is led by our 40th governor, and I'm happy to present him to you now. Please welcome our governor, Gavin Newsom.
I think the superintendent has done this before. Let me thank each and every one of you for the privilege of your time, and I'll brag on the superintendent and the chair of our board and others that are assembled, including Dr. Galley, just in a moment. But I want to talk a little bit about this week. Just a couple days ago on Monday, we announced the state was going to reach an historic milestone, a surplus the likes of which no other state in American history has ever experienced. $75.7 billion, almost a $76 billion operating surplus in the state of California. We marked that moment by making a point that the superintendent just made. We're not coming back as a state. The state is roaring back after a pandemic-induced recession. We're mindful that by no stretch of the imagination are where we want to be, but we're also mindful of the fact that in February, California created 41%. Californians created 41% of America's jobs. This state is indeed coming roaring back. With that surplus comes a great deal of responsibility to be more accountable, more transparent, and to address some of these systemic issues, many of which we're assembled here today to announce and discuss. We started, though, by providing an assurance to the people of the state of California, the taxpayers of the state of California, particularly those that have been most impacted by COVID-19, that we see you and we have your back. And we announced a $12 billion commitment, the largest state tax rebate in American history to families earning up to $75,000. 78%, almost 80% of taxpayers, tax filers will receive a direct check, a direct stimulus, and a supplemental check if those tax filers have children under the age of 6 years old. Just yesterday, we announced an historic investment in one of the pre-existing conditions in this state, and that's the issue of poverty in its most acute form and manifestation, the issue of homelessness. An equivalent amount of money, $12 billion, 10x what we committed to address the issue of homelessness just last year. 10x what we committed last year to address the issue of homelessness, to focus on ending family homelessness within 5 years, to address what's happening on the streets and sidewalks, and to address the comprehensive need to not only address those that are acutely challenged, but also provide supports so that we can prevent homelessness in the first place, to provide those supplemental rent payments, to provide first and last month's rent, to provide those emergency grants to millions of Californians that are one paycheck away from ending up on the streets and sidewalks. We also announced a commitment, and I was reminded of this just driving up here, that this state needs to clean itself up. We actually need to clean the streets. We need to clean the thoroughfares and the entrances and exits to major communities like yours, that we have to address some of the accumulation on the side of our freeways of mattresses and all the illegal dumping, and that we can beautify this state as well in the process. It's not just about removing litter, it's about bringing back a sense of pride and community and re-engaging our artists up and down the state. And we put an historic investment just 2 years ago. It was $60 million to invest in litter removal statewide. The announcement we made yesterday was $1.5 billion to not only pick up litter, but to beautify our thoroughfares and beautify this state. I say all of that to contextualize this moment because so often a week like this, you hear a lot of numbers, talk in terms of superlatives. I made this point on Monday. You're going to be hearing a lot that may sound like hyperbole, talking in historic terms, transformative terms. But the reality is we are talking in historic terms and transformational terms. And I hope people are paying attention because what I'm about to say, I never thought I'd ever have a chance to say as a Californian, let alone as governor of this state. What I'm about to announce today is incredible privilege as a fifth-generation Californian, as someone with 4 young children, as someone who cares deeply about this community, cares deeply about all of our children. The opportunity to share with you this budget is one of the most exciting things I've ever had the privilege and opportunity to do. You heard from Linda Darling-Hammond. She talked in those historic terms. She talked about transformation. The superintendent about the opportunity to speak, as well as Dr. Galley, not in terms of marginal investments in the millions, but transformational investments in the billions. On Friday, we will submit to the legislature a May revise. It will include the highest historic investment in K through 14 education in California's history. But with that, we are looking to transform, not go back to where we were, but to transform our educational system. And we are putting out a blueprint over the next 5 years for total transformation. And that blueprint includes creating a new grade and fully implementing a commitment that all 4-year-olds will get high quality instructional education by creating that new grade. TK will now be fully implemented in the state of California, a $2.7 billion investment. We've often said this, people, we talk about achievement gaps. It's a readiness gap as much or more than it is an achievement gap. People aren't left behind as often as they start behind. And that's why that investment is so foundational and so important. 3 hours minimum of instructional time is connected with that TK investment. We recognize that we need to provide more enrichment. We need to provide more wraparound services. We need to do more in the classroom to recognize the issues outside the classroom. Why are we here? Because you're doing about as well or better than any community in this state. The fact that this school, this elementary school, has washers and dryers, not for the kids, but for families, says a lot about the society and the world we're living in, but also says a lot about the resourcefulness of this community, a recognition that we need to break down those silos between the community we're working in and the community we're serving and educating in. And that's exactly what this budget commits to do. We've talked a lot about community schools over the years, but we haven't followed up with real resources. We put in 10 million here, 20 million here, we put 100 million over a few years there, but we've never made a commitment like this. $3 billion for community schools and wraparound services all up and down the state of California to build on many of these models of success. And we'll talk about that enrichment in a moment and in the Q&A about what that looks like and what that means. But one of the things that I'm so proud of is the thing that brought Dr. Galley down here today, and that's to get serious about the issue of brain health, get serious about the issue of adolescent mental health, to get serious about reconciling the fact that the brain is also part of the body and that we need to do more and better to address, as the superintendent talked about his own trauma as a child, but talk about the trauma that so many have experienced over the course of last year, but for that matter, over the course of the last few decades. Issues of anxiety and deep depression leading to tragic outcomes. I don't need to enumerate all those tragic outcomes. You live it here in this community, at this school. So many communities struggling because of lack of access to counselors and support services. What we're doing today is something we've never done in state history. It literally brought Dr. Galley down. We were sitting in the back a moment ago. He said, "Do you realize that we're actually about to make this announcement?" He goes, "Of all the things I thought I'd have a privilege to do, I never thought we'd actually be here just 2.5 years into the administration. And we're here because of all of you and the extraordinary surplus that provides this privilege." But $4 billion commitment for wellness, for mental health, a $4 billion commitment for universal screening and access to real treatment based upon need for every child 0 to 25 in the state of California, the most comprehensive, transformational youth behavioral health commitment this state has ever made. That's also part of the announcement we're making here today. And I want to thank Dr. Galley for his incredible support and stewardship and leadership, and those points of connection in this opportunity are self-evidently, most importantly, defined by the place and location that so many of our youth are each and every day during the school year. And that's why school-based counselors, wellness centers at school sites are integral in advancing that cause. That's the third of what is just 6 major announcements that we're making here today. Let me briefly sum up the remaining three as part of this $20 billion transformational commitment that we are announcing here today. In addition to universal support for all 4-year-olds with TK for all, in addition to the $3 billion for community supports and wraparound services through a community school model, in addition to the $4 billion we announced on behavioral health and mental health for our kids. We also want to fulfill the promise that was made and promoted, and I give the former governor enormous credit for Proposition 49. Arnold Schwarzenegger made a commitment, and the people of California backed that commitment up. Provide support services after school, before school, and support services for activities and enrichment during the summer. That was the After School for All initiative. The problem is that set aside became a ceiling, not just a floor. At about $550 million a year wasn't enough to provide comprehensive after-school programs. And for all the good intention and for all the promotion, we've never been able to fill that universal commitment until today. We are announcing today a commitment that over the next number of years will total $5 billion each and every year, starting with $1 billion this year, but a commitment to fully implement and to fully advance that call for universal after school all up and down the state of California. We're going to get it done once and for all. Honestly, if that alone is all we were announcing, I'd say that's a pretty good year above baseline. But that's not all, and I don't want to sound like a salesman. I'm just an enthusiastic father and member of this community. And I want to just also acknowledge that we can't do all of this without all of you. And I appreciate the superintendent's direct recognition of each and every one of you and the power and potency and importance that was placed years ago by the incredible work of Linda Darling Hammond at Stanford University and all of the work she's done nationally advising on education reform. One of her principal calling cards is her expertise, her national leadership on teacher recruitment, teacher training, on supporting teacher residency, grant programs, and supporting opportunities to pay teachers more to invest their talents in communities that are underserved and communities that are under-resourced. $3.3 billion, $3.3 billion for teacher preparedness, $3.3 billion for grants, $3.3 billion to help with residency programs and loans, $3.3 billion to help support those teachers that are helping our poorest and most vulnerable communities with STEM, investing in math and science, and making sure that we have more resources to back up those teachers and those paraprofessionals. So we're really proud of that commitment as well. But we also, in closing, recognize that we also need to reduce a little bit of the stress by reducing the ratios across the spectrum for our teachers. And this budget provides money we have not had in the past. We talk about student-teacher ratios, but we've never had the resources to really address it until now. And we're putting in over $1 billion, $1.1 billion specifically to provide more counselors, more teachers, more support staff at schools all across the state. And we've numerically done it where we want to see no less than 5 in every low-performing school and low-income district in the state of California, minimum, so that we see real equity and real targeted focus at addressing some of those ratios. And by the way, on the TK, we're cutting the ratios in half, from 24-to-1 down to 12-to-1, with an additional $740 million investment. So we mean business when it comes to these ratios. And I'll just conclude by making 2 additional announcements. We talked about, some didn't like the phrase learning loss because they said you can't lose something you never had, which I understood. So we decided to flip that a little bit, and we call our commitment now, $2.6 billion commitment this year, our proposal to talk about accelerated learning. And to talk about accelerated learning through what we refer to as high-dose tutoring. And we want to not double down. We want to have interventions with high-dose tutoring to address some of the anxiety and some of the gaps because of the fits and start over this last school year. And so we're putting an additional $2.6 billion specifically targeted at scientifically based, really effective high-dose tutoring and investments that we think can make a real impact across the spectrum in our K through 12 education system. But I will just finally say that all that's nice, but one of the things I'm most excited about is this final announcement today. Tune in Friday for more on education. It is one of the issues that just infuriates, I think, all of us is that we live in a society of haves and have-nots. We talk often about income inequality. We don't always talk about wealth inequality as much as I think we should. Talk about assets and the disparities in assets and opportunities. I had the privilege over the course of many, many years, and I had my firstborn, Montana, to open up a 529 account. Not everyone can afford a 529 account. Not everybody could start to seed those investments early on to create a college-going mindset within the family and within the minds of our children. In fact, the vast majority of folks never even heard of a 529 account, can never even imagine getting the tax benefits wealthy families are able to get. One of the things I was very proud of as mayor of San Francisco is we created a small program called Kindergarten to College. And we became the first city in the United States of America to open up child college savings accounts to incoming kindergartners. It was a very exciting program. I remember announcing it with the Obama administration, and we've seen it replicated in some communities up and down the state. Last year, we ought to put $25 million to build on some pilots around the state. $25 million was not going to ultimately change the trajectory for folks. And that's why today, I'm very pleased to announce that we are going to open up, if we are successful with this proposal. It is not Prop 98 money. This is general fund money. Additional resources to open up 3.7 million child savings accounts, and providing opportunities for every low-income Californian that enters into our school system to have their own personal savings account, seeding it with $500 foster and homeless youth, an additional $500. No state in American history has ever done anything like this at the scale we are committing to do it. And then every first grader coming in will build off that and provide hundreds of millions of dollars of additional resources to build those accounts. If you believe in going to college, you got to create a college calling mindset. And once a mind is stretched, it never goes back to its original form. A young child with even as little as $400 is 7 times more likely to go into college because they have a modest amount of savings. Without that, you don't even think like that. We're putting $2 billion up to create these accounts and create the opportunity for families to focus on financial literacy, focus on developing assets, and focusing on getting their kids to have a college-going mindset or a trade school mindset. It's about lifelong learning. We're not going to moralize, but we do recognize the world we're entering and the world we're living in, and our children are going to need more beyond the K through 12 or even TK through 12 experience. And so we're poised to do something that the academics have been promoting for decades, and the researchers have said it's one of the best investments in breaking the cycle of poverty. And that's providing something that the vast majority of parents don't even have. And that's a checking and a savings account in that young child's name where they can build up not only assets, but build that mindset in terms of creating that college-going culture. So forgive me for being so long-winded. I'm just profoundly enthusiastic about joining all of you here today. I'm so grateful for this privilege and opportunity to look at transforming public education in the state of California. It was transformed last year for all the wrong reasons. We're now going to transform it in the next 5 years for all the right reasons. And no longer will we be bottom in per pupil expenditures. And this state and our kids, I assure you, are top of our agenda. So forgive me again for all the time, but I wanted folks to understand the attention we're placing on these issues and what we hope is the power and potency of this $20 billion transformation of our public education system that we are presenting formally again Friday to the California legislature for their consideration. With that, we are happy to take any questions.
Governor, welcome to the Central Coast. Welcome to the Central Coast. My name is Adriana Frederick Sutton from Univision. I have a question for you. What are you doing regarding the digital divide so that students have access to internet, knowing that it's been a really big problem in the Central Coast and California? Thank you.
We are going to be making a rather significant announcement on Friday, and at my own peril, I think I've announced enough today. I'll leave it at that. But we will not be, I can assure you this, playing in the margins on addressing the digital divide and looking at access, looking at quality, and looking at universal opportunities that not only include access to broadband, but devices as well.
Thanks for doing that. Governor, last time we spoke, you said we were on track to meet the June 15th reopening. What does that mean for education come this fall? And is it your belief that schools should be fully reopened come the fall?
Yeah, it is my belief. That's our commitment, it's our resolve, it's our expectation. And it's codified June 30th, midnight, in statute. So we are not only expecting full-time in-person instruction, but we're also backing it up with additional supports, additional resources. I mentioned that $2.6 billion for tutoring, that $2.6 billion for accelerated learning. That $2.6 billion builds on the $4.6 billion that was approved and advanced in a proposal that was codified and supported by the legislature in March, all around supporting our ability to safely reopen our schools for in-person instruction. And so that is the expectation. It's certainly mine and will be the case again June 30th at midnight in statute.
Learning loss. Can you tell me a little bit about how you plan on dealing with that this coming summer and fall?
Well, we're looking to expand the opportunities that are being expanded just right here in this elementary school, and that's providing year-round education, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., summer school. They already have a wait list here for summer school. We're seeing the vast majority, I think, Mr. Superintendent, it's 90+% of the districts providing summer school enrichment across the board, resources they've never had in the past to be able to do that and support those enrichment and wraparound activities and supports. And we also are looking, and Linda's been talking a lot about this, writing a lot about this. Look, we're still stuck on an agrarian calendar, and that means a lot more here in Monterey County than in other parts of the state. But this notion that we have to be stuck in a mindset for a world that's changed a bit from bygone eras suggests perhaps we can reimagine and rethink the school day, the school year, and start to provide the kind of flexibility and resources that are necessary to do that. And we're allowing, in the language we refer to as our trailer bill, as well as the resources we're putting up to provide districts like this the ability to reimagine their school year and their enrichment programs to address not just learning loss, thank you, but also to accelerate learning and address equity foundationally. And again, this $20 billion proposal today is all around equity and closing gaps and advancing the needs of low-income communities and providing the same resources that districts where I send my kids are afforded.
Hi, Governor. My name is Celia Jimenez, and what is the plan B if the vaccination rates don't improve or in case the case rates increase?
Plan A is to continue to keep our vaccine rates going. We're at 1.1% positivity. We had 1,931 cases today. Our case rate remains stable and among the lowest in the nation. The positivity rate remains stable. It's among the lowest in the nation. If we continue with our vaccine rates, just shy of 33 million doses have been administered. We're not backing away from requesting the full allocation from the federal government, 2,076,000 doses we ordered this week from the federal government. That's the full allotment that we're afforded. If we continue in the rate of administration, continue to see people take advantage of the opportunity to get vaccinated, then there's no question Plan A is the only plan we need. And June 15th, a number of weeks away, we'll move beyond the blueprint and we'll be in a completely different space. Now, I want to clarify in that context that we will be updating our mask guidelines. Outdoor masking, if we reach that threshold where we hope to be, will be substantially, in fact, will be eliminated those mandates. There'll be guidelines and recommendations, but for indoor activities, we will still have likely some mask guidelines and mandates, but we hope sooner than later that those will be lifted as well. But the bottom line is we'll go back to most broad strokes, a semblance of normalcy if we continue down this path in the next 5 weeks. And I'm confident, based on all the good work that's being done all throughout this state, that we'll reach those goals.
And then this one is about the drought in California. You declare a drought emergency. Is there a reason why Monterey County is not in this list?
Yeah, we're looking county by county, region by region, making determinations on the basis of hydrology, on the basis of storage and need. We announced first 2 counties in a drought emergency in Sonoma and Mendocino County just over 3 weeks ago. Just 2 days ago, I was out in the Central Valley, not here, Central Coast, Central Valley, announcing that we added an additional 39 counties to that list, a total now of 41. I made the point that we will flex up as needed, and we're mindful of changing conditions in real time. We also announced a $5.1 billion package to support safe drinking water, to support water system improvements. Those include systems out here in Monterey County, improved support here in the county as well. I appreciate the privilege of everybody's time. I'm really grateful and humbled that the superintendent joined us, and I thank him for all his extraordinary leadership during these trying times. It's wonderful, as always, to be with Linda Darling Hammond and her remarkable leadership and partnership, and to have Dr. Galley here just showing a sense of urgency and opportunity to develop partnerships with communities, counties, community-based organizations, and the Health and Human Service Agency, integrate them with our public education system. To the principal, superintendent, county, and local superintendent, we're incredibly grateful, and to all the educators at this remarkable elementary school, thank you. Take care, everybody.
For the latest information regarding the COVID-19 pandemic in Cupertino, please visit cupertino.org/coronavirus.